I'm a landscape photographer. My name is Dan, and in this video, I adventure into Great Sand Dunes National Park. All I want to do as a photographer, all we ever hope for, is to take just one good photo when we go out shooting, alright? There's nothing else in this world that I want, and I tried to do that here in the sand. I don't want a new camera. I definitely don't want a new lens. Me? Nope. Not me. Switch camera systems? Frick that. Not something I want to do. The only thing I desire is to take one good photo. I lied, I'm greedy. There are two things. The second thing I wanted on this trip was to not fill my tripod up with sand.
Congratulations. If you've made it to this part of this video, you are in the deepest depths of peak design maintenance video lore. And this is the most complicated thing that I will ever explain.
One more time.
Comet's been flying around Earth.
That's the Lord of the Name. It's
So I really hope I'm not butchering that pronunciation.
Tsuchinshan Atlas.
Tsuchinshan.
Comet Tsuchinshan.
C-23A3.
C Comet
Tsuchinshan Atlas.
Atlas.
Tsuchinshan. I should probably just call it the Comet from now on.
Yeah, buddy. I think I'll join you in that. Do you remember the comet from 1 billion years ago? You know, back in 2024. So was this comet photo my one good photo? Absolutely not. No way I'm showing you that photo before we get to the end screen of this video. Video retention. But to bring you along for this story, I have to tell you how I was feeling before the trip. At this particular time, I was motivated to make the best use of a Colorado visit. Despite that motivation, my photography felt sort of directionless, if that makes sense. And don't worry, nothing has changed, it still does. But I was shooting homeless photos. Photos that didn't belong to a project, as James recently put it. So I heard about the comet, I caught comet fever, and I started chasing it. Now, I had learned about Great Sand Dunes a few years ago. I knew that it was known for dark skies, and it was on my list. It's sort of a trek from Denver, so I just hadn't yet gotten around to it on prior trips. Given all these factors, that motivation finally met with some purpose for a mini project. New moon was November 1st, so I quickly researched and cobbled together a Halloween dunes trip. The weather looked decent, the skies looked good enough to risk it. I figured the comet would still be visible in a long exposure, and I knew this because I had shot it several times earlier in the month, and I had a solid concept of that one good photo that I'd like to go out and take. There was also nothing stressful at all happening in the US at this time, so I figured that 2 days of hiking and shooting in solitude would do me well. So off I went to fill up my tripod with some sand. And here's a pro tip. If you're from the East Coast like me, there is plenty of opportunity to accidentally strike an animal at high speed out west. You're just trying to get to where you're going, and some of them are sad. And so sometimes they try to jump in front of your vehicle in the dark and die. So be careful. But I didn't hit any of them. There's just no evidence of that happening. In all seriousness, that damage is from a completely unrelated incident. Just to make this joke, that was a Pennsylvania deer. So the plan was this. I had 2 nights. I was going to shoot Golden Hour, Milky Way, and the Comet. And I was going to do that twice. I spent time planning on all trails, and to be honest with you, I don't think I would even want them to sponsor a small video series in the future. But the emphasis for night 1 was on scouting, seeing how far I could make it, and how quickly. And for night 2, I was going to double down on what was working the day before during the scout. Then finally, I planned to do sunrise on my way out of town. That part was ambitious, and I'll tell you right now that sunrise definitely didn't happen. Now that you know what the plan was, let me tell you all the ways it fell apart. And I'm being dramatic, it worked out fine, but indulge me as I share 3 of my first world struggles, if only to reinforce the idea that prepping for a photo trip can make a big difference in what you're able to take away from it. Number 1, hiking in sand always sucks. But in the wind and the cold and at altitude, with a heavier pack, it really blows. This little excursion truly was one of my favorite experiences ever, but a hefty portion of the fun was of the Type 2 variety. You already know I filled the tripod, but this sand was in the crevices of my bag forever. In my boots forever. So much of it was in my boots. Trekking poles with snow baskets help for sure here, but you probably want gaiters as well if you have them. The second problem was how beautiful it was. Now, how is this a problem, you ask? Well, at Golden Hour, this was one of those places where the possibilities are endless, and it's overwhelming in a distracting way. I found myself spinning around trying to make sense of how alien the landscape felt, and how magical it looked in the setting directional light. I was torn between dunes and mountains. I was torn between shooting wide and shooting tight. At some point, I'm even just torn between shooting and putting the camera down to soak it all in. As much as I had planned the hiking, the Milky Way, and my one shot, I hadn't really prepared to spin around like a dumbass at sunset. If you've been in a situation like this, you know it can get a little panicky, and the stakes feel high in the moment, because I didn't know exactly how the weather would be the next day, and I didn't want to miss anything. And the third problem? This was all just the first few hours of the first afternoon. As the sun continued to set, clouds were moving in where the Milky Way core would be, and the comet was to the right of the core. Unfortunately, it would stay cloudy on the core side for several hours into the night, beyond the point where I was able to wait them out before needing to hike out. Despite the struggles, I did leave the dunes with a lot of sand and 3 big wins. Number 1, I got some good stills, and I feel like I did some decent damage with some of the iPhone shots as well. I also made some small progress on the big questions. Like, what is my style? While it's not the best photo of the trip, I'm really happy with my comet chasing. The Milky Way and comet were tough for me to frame up together on a 28 prime. It's something I considered renting a 20mm for when I was practicing earlier in October. So on the second night, when the cloud cover wasn't there, I took advantage of the really dark skies and shot this as a 3-frame panorama with lots of overlap. And now, it's on the wall as part of my new set. Second, I got some solid time lapses and B-roll. What I like about time lapses, particularly in places like these, is that you can sort of set it and forget it. Not completely, but once you get some practice in, shooting a time lapse is a good way to leave a location with some media while also thoroughly enjoying a scene in the moment, because you aren't spinning around and making composition decisions again and again and again while it's running. And I started shooting C-Log around this time too. I don't know what I'm doing, and it feels a little silly to live in a new world where I don't know how to expose properly yet, but maybe I'll get there. And third, it was a killer workout, which would come in handy later in the month when I tried to take just one good photo in another cool spot. Unfortunately, there were some regrets, there always are. Like I said, I skipped sunrise on the way out of town. There was just nothing left to give for these old bones, and I slept in deeply. And then came my one good photo. The goal was to get a really clean edit of a dune silhouette against the Milky Way in the night sky. Ideally with the comet there too, if I could fit it. I wanted good golden blue contrast, and I was going for sort of an unrealistic look, where the contrast across the scene is lower than in real life, and brighter than in real life. And ideally, I really wanted to hike up the dune ridge and get into the scene as the subject, a dark silhouette against the stars. A couple problems with that. I was still miles into the dunes, and I was just about out of water at this point. I also wasn't facing the core side. As it turns out, night 1 was just the better overall conditions in terms of where I hiked to and by when. The clouds were still covering the core, so I set up my time-lapse to shoot the backside of the Milky Way, where I had a better dune composition anyway. And eventually, I'd go on to use several of those time-lapse frames to noise stack a super clean base image. So did I leave with one good photo? Not quite. I'm happy with this effort, but it's far from perfect. I'm trying to draw your eye in here, let you explore vertically, to drift to the other stars to catch a glimpse of the dune grass, but there's no strong subject like I envisioned. There's no core, and there's no comet. It is one of the cleanest astro images that I've captured from a technical standpoint though, so that does feel like a big win, and a culmination of lots of practice through the years. If you liked this format, check out this next video from my time in New Zealand, or this one with some more shots from out west.